Welcome to my channel where we cover the lore of video games. We cover all kinds from the mainstream to the indie, so I hope you enjoy your stay, and welcome to the Chronicler of Lore. Fortunato has been investigating the appearance of Pandaemonium in the ethereal sea, and he's made a few discoveries that he thinks you should hear about, so you and Claudian scientists head to the Aetioscope to meet up with the man. Professor Claudian had disappeared when he went into Azizla alone, which was a good way to die since the place isn't exactly safe. His airship was found near the Etherochemical Research Facility, but he wasn't anywhere to be seen. There were signs that he forced his way into the facility though. Fortunato's people followed his trail, but it ended in a very unusual way. Both Claudian and the part of the place that he'd wandered into had vanished entirely. His people think that the part of Azizla that disappeared reappeared in the ethereal sea and was turned into the version of Pandaemonium that's in the present day, which means Claudian may very well be inside of it. Fortunato thinks it's worth the risk to send someone into the place to find the missing professor, and by someone he means you. But there's another not so small issue that you'll have to deal with first. A creature from inside of the prison came out, and Fortunato's people saw the thing start eating the ether around it. Considering the fact that the ethereal sea is full of the souls of the dead, messing with it could ruin the entire cycle of rebirth, which means it needs to be dealt with quickly. After that, you'll be able to search for Claudian. The memory crystal was found in Claudian's ship, so Fortunato gives it to you just in case you can use it for something. Nemgigi thinks you may actually have a harder time dealing with the monsters in Pandaemonium this go around, mainly because you don't have Themis there to summon phantom warriors to fight with you. But what she doesn't know is you've had the ability to summon people for a very long time now, so you head off to face the monster. This thing looks like one of the monstrous creatures from the Promised Neverland, and it's not exactly happy that you messed up its meal. It tries really hard to kill you for that, but you prove yourself to be the more deadly predator, and you put it down, freeing all of the ether-rich souls that it had consumed. As soon as the thing is destroyed, a woman reveals that she was watching your fight, and she was eager to see if you were just as strong as she had heard. And it's not just any woman, it's Athena, La Habrea's wife and the former leader of Pandaemonium. She's also the person who made this new place, right in the heart of the ethereal sea. She wasn't exactly expecting to run into you in this time period, but that might work out for the best considering all that you managed to accomplish when you stepped into the past. She seems to be way too aware of your exploits, and considering the fact that you learned that she was in fact completely nuts, the Warrior of Light is prepped and ready to attack her despite the fact that she claims to not be a bad guy. She's done some things that were questionable at best, but they were all in the name of science, and since she was reborn, she plans on continuing those experiments. She'd like to do that without violence, and she thinks that if you hear her out, you might see that her experiments are worth completing. The Warrior of Light is a tad curious, especially about how the woman managed to be reborn at all, so she holds off on the stabbing and lets her talk. Athena had always planned on using the souls of the ethereal sea for her work, since the place provides all of the materials that she needs, but she hadn't planned on finding someone as useful as Professor Claudian. She does have him, but she's not gonna hurt him since he's a part of what she needs to finally become a god. The more she talks, the closer she gets to making the Warrior of Light stab her, and she sees that, so she decides to summon some people who can tell you more about her and her work in a way that you'll be more receptive to. And since you have the memory stone that Claudian had been studying, she could use that to summon your teachers. That particular stone holds the memories of both La Habrea and Erythonius, and she uses her powers to give those memories physical form. That way they can explain why she's trying to become a god. She wants you to understand because you have a part to play too, and she figures things will go more smoothly if you just decide to cooperate. She teleports away, leaving you with Erythonius and La Habrea, who both have a lot of questions for you since they have no idea where they are or why. So you take them back to the Aetioscope where you can talk without worrying about getting attacked by anything. The two ancients don't know how long it's been since they last saw you, but the fact that they remember you means that the memories that were stored in that particular crystal came sometime after you went through Pandaemonium on Elpis. Erythonius remembers you telling him about the crystal, but he never would have guessed that the memories that it held belonged to him and his dad. Finding out that you were from the future does clear up a few mysteries though, especially since he had looked for you after a while but couldn't find a single trace of you. He remembers the final days hitting the world, but he doesn't know how the event ended. Seeing that your future exists lets him know that something survived, but he wants to know if his people did. That's not exactly a simple yes or no question, and La Habrea doesn't feel like wasting time getting you to explain it all, since Athena being there may not let the world survive anyway. While the two ancients look like they have physical bodies, other than their mind and memories, they don't have any actual power. Athena made them so they could talk to you, not help you fight. But honestly, even doing that wasn't going to be all that helpful to her plans, since she should have been well aware of the fact that her husband, who outright killed her to stop her plans in the first place, wouldn't have anything good to say about what she's doing. He definitely wouldn't try to convince you to work with her, so I have to say that her pulling their memories out of the crystal was not smart at all. Erythonius doesn't know how she knew that they had worked with you in the first place, since she was extremely dead at the time, but La Habrea figures that she must have made a way for her to either monitor the goings on in Pandaemonium even after her death, or she'd found a way to get the info after she was reborn. Either way, she knows more about current events than they do, which is never a good position to be in. So La Habrea wants Claudian's people to tell him everything they've learned about this modern day Pandaemonium, once they stop hiding in the corner. When you finally convince them to come over and talk, Nemgigi admits that she's excited to talk to the ancients in the semi-flesh, but she is a little scared. A 9-foot-tall La Habrea is kind of intimidating, but since they don't have the power to do anything more than talk, Erythonius doesn't think anyone should be scared of them at all. Turns out being disintegrated by the power of an ancient wasn't what Nemgigi was scared of anyway. She was just afraid that she wouldn't have enough time to ask all of the questions that she wanted to. But as long as she's willing to share her information with them, La Habrea is perfectly fine with answering any of her questions. After he tells you everything he can about Athena and her mission to become a god, which would have ended with everyone on Etheirys being killed. Athena believes a god should be able to create souls at will, and she wants that power. That's why she decided to do her last experiments in the Ethereal Sea. The place is a limitless pool of ether that she can draw from. Granted, drawing on that ether could put an end to all life, but she doesn't really care. Even knowing that, seeing his mother's face still reminded Erythonius of how much he loved her. Granted, he still plans on working against her as best he can. While they put their information together, they all think it's time for you to get started searching through the prison. Before you leave, Erythonius takes the memory crystal from you, just in case it has any more useful tidbits stored inside of it. While he helps you get into Pandaemonium, La Habrea asks Nemgigi if she knows anything about something called Auracite. She knows a bit about it from the legends of Ivalice and from the things she's heard about La Habrea the Ascian. She almost mentions his name, but considering the fact that she's talking to a priest sundering La Habrea, she catches herself in a way that lets the man know that she was clearly about to say his name in connection with the black Auracite called the Heart of Sabik. Apparently La Habrea recognizes the name, but he figured that it would have been lost after all of these years. That means it'll likely be an issue in the near future, but first you have to deal with whatever you find inside of Pandaemonium. You'll have to clear out an area alone before the two ancients can help you search the place, so you head in to get started. The first thing you find is the last thing you expected to see. Themis. He's not actually Themis, but something Athena made using a soul and some magic. He's just as real as La Habrea and Erythonius, but he hasn't gotten dumber because he immediately figures out that he's in the future. Athena revived herself somehow, and you've come there to stop her. He expected no less, but there is a problem. He was made to serve Athena, and he can't resist her, so the two of you will have to fight in the not too distant future. It's not something the Warrior of Light wants to do, but Themis reminds her that he's just an illusion, so it's not all that big of a deal. Even though she programmed him to fight you, Themis is still willing to spill Athena's secrets because she's apparently really bad at the whole making loyal servants thing. And he lets you know that she has a new vessel to replace Erythonius, and she's gathering souls to modify her essence. The problem is those souls aren't all that strong, so she's decided that the Warrior of Light would be far more useful to her if she can figure out why you're so strong despite your thin ether. She made something to test you so she could watch and learn the secret of your strength. And I'm not gonna lie, I think she has a whole lot more faith in your abilities than you do, because the woman's not making you fight some random creature. She put a soul inside of Pandaemonium itself so the whole building can fight you. Themis expects you to beat the thing pretty easily, then after that the two of you will throw hands for the second time. Athena could have made the living fortress be a little less creepy looking, but she was probably more interested in power over appearance. But she didn't give it enough of either because the Warrior of Light and her summoned warriors destroy it. With the walking fortress beaten, Themis shows back up, and he's quite impressed by your handiwork as usual. Your victory opened Pandaemonium's last gate, and that's where he'll wait for you. Erythonius and La Habrea show up right as he leaves, so La Habrea wants you to tell him what the man said so you all can figure out what to do next. Once you tell him about Athena's plan to make you fight Themis, he's not all that surprised. The boy was one of the most magically gifted ancients, so of course she would use him if she could, which means she probably snatched his soul out of the ethereal sea and used Themis' memories to build the perfect puppet. Erythonius is more shocked to hear that Athena actually managed to bring Pandaemonium to life. The fact that she could do that means she's almost at the end of her research, but after trading notes with Nemgigi, they figured out a way to stop her, and they think the Heart of Sabik is the key. The Warrior of Light recognizes the name, which she should, since La Habrea had used it to power the Ultima weapon and try to kill you with the Ultima spell. The heart is something that Athena made during her time with the words of La Habrea before Pandaemonium even existed. She had brought a crystal that she said she found somewhere to them, and the thing held a lot of power. She called it Auracite and started studying it, and eventually she created the Heart of Sabik from it. Athena never told them where she found the original crystal, so they figured that it was from another star. It wasn't until later that they figured out that the Auracite enhances the desires of anyone who comes in contact with it, which would explain why Athena went a little overboard with her work after she found it. But by the time La Habrea had locked the Auracite away, Athena had already gone so far down her crazy path that he had to kill her. After that, he took the Heart of Sabik and decided to guard it himself, since the thing held some of the densest and most destructive ether he'd ever seen. It was all but impossible to study, but he thinks Athena may have done something to it to make it that way so no one would know that she had stored her memories inside of it. If she had set up a way to give her memories physical form, similar to how she drew La Habrea and Erythonius out of their stone, that could explain how she could have been reborn, but it doesn't explain what made her come back at this very moment. When the Warrior of Light beat La Habrea in the Ultima weapon, she hadn't taken the time to grab the Heart of Sabik. Granted, she had only heard the Ascian mention it, plus it wasn't like there was time anyway, so she hadn't seen it since that day. La Habrea, the Ascian not the Ancient, wasn't dead, so he very likely took the heart with him. A good while later, he was killed in the Aetherochemical Research Facility by Thornton, and that just so happens to be the exact place where Claudian went missing. The professor had been following the ethereal signature of something that was similar to the memory crystal that he'd found, which was likely the heart. Since Athena had reappeared not long after that, it's safe to say that he had something to do with her resurrection, but that still leaves the question of why. On top of that, even though Athena's a memory made flesh like La Habrea and Erythonius, she's just as powerful as she was when she had a physical body, or at least close to it, which means she must have found a vessel that was capable of containing her power. But with all of the people of the source being sundered fragments of what they used to be, that shouldn't have been possible. Possible or not, she's done it, and if Themis is to be believed, she's very close to making that body into a god. The thing is, the only body that should have been able to hold the power that she needed was Erythonius, and his body would definitely have decayed a long time ago, so the mystery of what vessel she could be using won't be solved right now. Not before you fight Themis. Erythonius doesn't think the fight will be easy, but he does think that if you win, you may be able to break Themis from Athena's control. If you weaken him enough, it should work, but he won't remain solid for long once his essence starts to dissipate, so you'll have to ask your questions quickly. Granted, you also have to survive the fight, because if anyone remembers the last time you faced off against the Littlebuss, you would know that survival's not exactly guaranteed. Themis doesn't take on the form of the first Warrior of Light like his Ascian form did, but what he turns into is far harder to deal with. The Warrior of Light still manages to pull off a victory, which causes Themis to transform back. With his defeat, Athena's hold on his mind breaks and he goes back to normal. He was well aware of the fact that Athena's magic could make her victims focus solely on their greatest desire and ignore everything else, but he hadn't thought that the thing that he wanted most was to test himself against you. Now that he's done his part, Athena releases him so he'll fade away, but the Warrior of Light uses her own ether to hold Themis together for a little bit longer. At least for long enough for him to do his job as emissary and judge Athena for her actions, and see that she's punished for them. You'll have to do the punishing part, of course, but he does have some information to share with your group that can help, so the two of you go back to meet up with La Habrea and Erythonius so you can get ready for your showdown with Athena. The vessel that Athena has is actually Claudian, which under normal circumstances wouldn't work. But Claudian turned out to be the perfect host, which let Athena put her memories into his body while his soul was still intact, and that let her resurrect herself in full as opposed to just being a living memory like Themis and the others. But since Claudian is a sundered being, Athena hasn't been able to put her full power into him, which is why she set her sights on you. Even sundered, the Warrior of Light is stronger than most of the ancients, and Athena figures that if she could add those properties to Claudian's body, she would have a vessel strong enough for her purposes. You have to stop her, obviously, but doing that won't necessarily mean you have to kill Claudian. Athena taking over his soul didn't destroy it. He just doesn't know that he's being controlled at all, so if you can wake him up, he should be able to push Athena out of his body. Eratosthenes doesn't understand why Claudine's body worked as Athena's vessel at all, but it should be pretty obvious by now. Claudian is a shard of Eratosthenes, the same way that the Warrior of Light is a shard of Azem. Themis didn't see Claudian, but he did hear Athena call him Eratosthenes, so that pretty much proves it. La Habrea had already figured that out because of course he did, but since Themis confirmed it, La Habrea thinks he knows how to save the man. The first thing that has to be done is the obvious, and that's beat the crap out of Athena so she can end up in the same weakened state as Themis. Granted, she has way more power than he had, and since you're the only one who can even fight her, you'll have to do it alone. After you do that, La Habrea has a plan that he won't tell anyone about because he's La Habrea. Well, that's part of it. The other reason he won't tell is because he doesn't want you thinking about anything other than fighting Athena. She's too strong for you to fight her and worry about Claudian's safety, which makes sense. Eratosthenes already has a lot on his mind too. Mainly he's wondering if his mother had never found that aura site, would she have actually been a loving parent and wife? La Habrea's wondered the same thing too, but there's no point in worrying about it since there's no way to know for sure. Since there's no point in delaying the inevitable any longer, you head off to fight Athena. A lot of people claim to be a god, and usually they're all talk. Athena isn't one of those. She's managed to build up real power. Unfortunately for her, she's not the first god the Warrior of Light has had to tangle with, and as per usual, she overpowers the god-to-be. Once Athena's back in her more manageable form, Eratosthenes wants to know what was the point of all of this. What was she really trying to achieve? La Habrea doesn't really care. The woman worked against the star, and for that she needs to die for good this time. That may be true, but Eratosthenes still wants to know why his mother abandoned her family for a mad quest. Athena's surprised that her son actually grew into somebody who would question why she would do anything instead of just going along with whatever she decided. But since he asked, she's willing to answer. Granted, her answer is pretty anticlimactic. She had a theory and she wanted to prove it, simple as that. She came to the conclusion that any real god would see her race as imperfect and would spend all of their time finding ways to remove their flaws and build a better being. Athena figured that the best way to help the star was to find a way to upgrade her people into the perfect stewards for the planet. And to do that, she needed the power to create souls, and she was perfectly fine with killing all of the imperfect life on Etheris to get it. She honestly sounds like Emmett Selk but without the actual motivation. He saw the sundered beings as imperfect and was willing to kill them all to restore the far superior ancients. Athena just came up with the idea that her people could be better and she could make them better if she had the power to create her own race. She claims that what she's doing is no different from what her people did all the time when they created new things and wiped out the old ones. The problem with that comparison is she didn't make the ancients in the first place, so since she didn't give them life, she doesn't have the right to decide that they don't need it anymore. While the aura site made her go over the edge, it didn't give Athena these ideas, no different from when someone gets drunk and does something that they regret. They always had it in them to do whatever it is that they did, they just had the good sense not to. The alcohol suppresses that good sense, and the aura site did that to Athena. The woman actually takes offense at the fact that Eratosthenes thinks he has the right to judge her, when he only existed to be a vessel for her power. She figures that his rebellious streak must have come from the fact that she left him with the soul. The woman got pregnant with him for the sole purpose of modifying his body so it would be able to handle her essence when she took it over. She modified his mind so he would adore her and follow her commands no matter what. But she made a few mistakes on that part. His lack of magical ability, all of his failures as a person, were all things that Athena made sure would happen as part of her plans, which honestly makes her quite possibly the single most evil person in Final Fantasy XIV. Valens was a child-murdering dick, but it takes a special kind of crazy to intentionally make your own child suffer up until the very day that you decide to kill them and have that be your plan before they're even born. Obviously, getting that type of information hits Eratosthenes pretty hard, but he handles it pretty well, and he lets his mother know that now that he knows what she wants, he'll make sure she never becomes a god. Athena takes that in stride and changes her plan. If she can't become the god of Etheris, then the star doesn't need to exist at all. While you were all talking, she had been building up ether, and she turns it all into a spirit bomb that she's going to use to destroy the ethereal sea, which would wipe out all life on the planet. There's pretty much nothing that the Warrior of Light can do to stop her, but La Habrea had told Eratosthenes before the fight even started that he was the key to beating his mother. While he is only a memory, his soul is currently in the body that Athena is using, something she clearly hadn't thought about when she pulled her son's memories out of that crystal. He can merge with his shard and wake him up. That way Claudian can push Athena out of his body, stop her attack, and make her just as powerless as any other memory until she fades away for good. He probably won't survive the encounter, and while some people would say that he's just a memory so it doesn't matter, he's alive, and self-preservation instincts alone make sacrificing yourself difficult. But the fact that La Habrea says that he's proud of him probably made the decision easier. Athena tries to command him not to, but after what she told him, she would have done better not saying anything at all. Fortunately for you and the rest of the world, Erythonius separates Athena from Claudian, causing her to lose all of her power. But that also causes Pandaemonium to start to collapse. La Habrea and Themis use the little bit of power that they have to get you and Claudian out of there, while Athena dies, but not before she solidifies her place as Mother of the Year by using her last words to tell Erythonius just how useless he is. The Warrior of Light and the others make it back outside just in time to watch Pandaemonium vanish. All that's left to do now is wait for Claudian to wake up. While you're waiting, La Habrea has something that he wants to ask you about. He hadn't missed Gigi's mentioning of the Ascian named La Habrea when she was telling him about everything that happened to get them to that point in history. She claimed that him and that particular Ascian weren't the same person, but the fact that he had used the Heart of Sabik to do some not so nice stuff has him wondering. Since you met and fought the Ascian, he wants to know if that's who he'll become. The fact that telling him won't affect time since he's just a memory in the present means there's really no harm in it. But since the two of them are completely different personality-wise, the Warrior of Light isn't certain whether this La Habrea or his successor becomes the body-snatching psycho that we all hate. The Ascians also switch bodies a lot, so that also makes it kind of rough to know their real identity. And after hearing some of the things that the Ascian did, La Habrea does have a hard time seeing himself becoming that. But after thinking about it, he admits that under the right circumstances, he probably would do pretty much anything if it meant fulfilling his duty to the star. That includes using the Heart of Sabik and going down the same path that Athena had, which means it's safe to say that he is in fact the La Habrea that you fought. While you chat, Claudian finally wakes up and he remembers bits and pieces of what happened, including seeing you fight Athena. He has Erythonius' memories too, and he wants to tell La Habrea how his son felt about him, but hearing the words from a sundered piece of his son is not the same, so he'd rather not, especially since he's technically the enemy of every living thing on the source. Claudian doesn't see it that way. The Ascian La Habrea is their enemy, but the La Habrea of the Convocation is an entirely different person, one who helped save them all. Being the logical man that he is, La Habrea thinks Claudian's an idiot for thinking that, but he's not going to argue the point. He does think that you still have one thing left to learn from Pandaemonium, and that is who was it that started all of this by setting Hephaestus free in the first place. That means you'll need to take one more trip to the past. He does warn you not to tell him anything about what happened to Athena. He doesn't think he'll change what he does, but you never know. With that said, he finally fades away. Themis feels like he's gonna fade away soon too, but he thinks he can stick around so he can hear what you learned from the past. Technically, he already knows what you're gonna find out since he's a memory of Themis from after you went back, but he wants to hear what you think about the news. So you head back into the past for what needs to be the last time, because time travel is always making new plot holes and paradoxes that are never fixed as smoothly as people think. When you get back to Pandaemonium in the past, La Habrea and the others are all surprised to see you since they didn't think you had a reason to come back there at all. When you tell them what you want, La Habrea isn't that eager to share any information with you, but Themis thinks that you do deserve a few answers since you did help fix the situation. After you left, Themis had given control of Pandaemonium back to La Habrea, and using some of Athena's research, they managed to restore Hegemone's mind and body. There's still a lot more prisons to fix and key wards to replace, but they're making progress. But before they can get the place back up and running, La Habrea has something that he needs to do, and he's willing to let you watch as long as you don't interfere. It involves Hegemony. He called her to meet with him because after all of the deaths, she's now the highest ranking key ward. That means she needs to know the full details about what it took for La Habrea to separate himself from Hephaestus. He fractured his soul to do it, and that cost him a lot of his power. He doesn't have the strength in his present state to use the magic that Hephaestus had used to control Pandaemonium's warders, or to free them from that control. Hephaestus had left behind some research that said to transform a vessel into one of Athena's Amythoi, you had to have complete control over the victim's mind. The magic that gave that control got it by amplifying the victim's strongest emotions, which in the case of Hesperos and Agnystus was their respect for La Habrea. That let Hephaestus throw Pandaemonium into chaos and take it over. But he couldn't have done that until someone set him free. That means someone was already under Athena's control before any of this started. It was the only way for the woman to guarantee that even after her death, her plans would get put into motion. And considering the fact that Hegemony had worked in Pandaemonium under Athena herself, her loyalty was to her and Pandaemonium, not to La Habrea. The woman tries to explain herself, but La Habrea binds her because he knows that Athena messed with her mind. But as he is, he doesn't have the power to undo it, so he decides that if he's going to have the power to truly serve the star, he has to repair his soul and merge with Hephaestus, bringing with it all of the power and painful memories that he had tried to banish. With his powers restored, he easily burns Athena's mind control out of Hegemony. That doesn't necessarily mean that she likes La Habrea, but he doesn't need his people to like him as long as they do their job. And he thinks Hegemony will be the perfect person to oversee Pandaemonium from now on. She is more than willing to do the job while he works to safeguard the star. As long as that remains his goal, Themis won't have to step in and put him back in his place, something he seems confident that he could do even with La Habrea at full power again. Now that he knows why his father is the way he is, Erythonius plans on working with him on his mission so they can be a family. The two of you, however, are not friends. So with this little excursion over, La Habrea tells you that it's time for the two of you to part ways and walk your separate paths. He says that like he knows where the two of you will end up in the future, even though he shouldn't. But like I said before, time travel is always a problem. With that done, you head back to your own time to talk to Claudian and future Themis. While you were gone, Themis let Claudian know everything that happened while Athena had Orochimaru'd his body. And that little bit of info let him understand that the ethereal signature that he had sensed in Aziz La had been Athena trying to find her vessel. But it hadn't started when he first found the memory crystal. The thing should have activated as soon as he touched it since he's Erythonius and it held his memories. But Themis figures that the changes brought about by the sundering must have made it take longer to resonate with the fractured soul of the ancient. But once he did get attuned to the crystal, that let Athena start to take him over, so he was already under her control before he even left to go to Aziz La. All of that is over now, but with his mind clear, Claudian can sense another memory stored inside of the crystal, and he hopes it holds the answers to why La Habrea and Erythonius had created the thing. Since he has Erythonius' memories, Claudian knows how to activate the crystal, so he turns it on and you all see the moment Erythonius put his final memory into it. The final days had started and things had started to go crazy with their creation magic, but La Habrea and the Convocation had gotten started on the plan to summon Zodiark. Themis had already agreed to become Zodiark's heart, but the one thing that the Convocation seemed to have forgotten about in the chaos was Pandaemonium and the dangerous creatures that it held. Even if they stopped the final days, if the chaos caused the cells of Pandaemonium to open and those creatures were allowed to run free, the final days stopping wouldn't have saved the world, it would have just ended in a different way. So Erythonius decided to go against the Convocation and not add his strength to Zodiark. Instead, he would stand guard over Pandaemonium alone to make sure that the creatures wouldn't get out. But he didn't know if he would die during the final days, so he decided to send the crystal with his and La Habrea's memories into the underworld, with a spell on it that would make it be drawn to his essence, so even if he died and got reborn, the crystal would remind him that he needed to get back to Pandaemonium. And if he couldn't make it back, he hoped that it'll find someone like the Warrior of Light to help with whatever problems popped up. And this is why I hate time travel. So Erythonius sent the stone into the ethereal sea because he didn't know if he would die and be reborn during the final days. If he did, the stone would find him, jumpstart his memories, and have him make a beeline for Pandaemonium. That part makes sense. Him mentioning you doesn't, because he shouldn't have known you at the time that he made the stone due to the fact that he only met you because he sent the stone and Claudian found it, which prompted you to go back in time to start this story. Time travel shenanigans aside, Claudian's happy to finally know how all of this started, but there is one more thing that will likely be a problem later. The heart of Sabik survived, and it was in Claudian's pocket. At least it doesn't have Athena's memories in it anymore, but it's still a powerful piece of auracite that Claudian plans on studying. He heads off to do just that, leaving you alone with Themis, who has one last thing to tell you. He was pulled from the ethereal sea, and he has memories of your fight at the top of the Crystal Tower and of him sending you to the past. He doesn't know exactly why he sent you back, but he thinks he had seen bits and pieces of your trip through Pandaemonium together. He didn't see how that journey went, but he saw you in Elpis, so he knew that he had to send you there. In other words, he saw you there because he sent you there, so he knew that he had to send you there. After Themis gives you a migraine trying to explain these shenanigans, he fades away into the ethereal sea, and the Warrior of Light heads off to save the world from whatever crisis pops up next. This concludes the story of Pandaemonium. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, donate if you can, and I'll see you guys next time.